Hey, geometry students, we're going to do, to end out this unit, we're going to do notes on lesson 1.6, which is on page 29 in your student journals. All right, so we're going to kind of read some stuff, go over some more vocab, and then I'm going to show you some pictures of just the different vocab that we're going to be doing so that you can hopefully keep it straight in your brains. If you remember complementary angles, complementary means that they add to 90 degrees. And I think you've learned this before, but if you haven't, no big deal. So complementary angles, the word complementary means to add to 90 degrees, or two angles that add up to 90 degrees. The catch here is that the angles can be connected. So imagine you have this, a right angle, right? And if they add to 90 degrees, you have two angles in here. Let's say they're not like split right down the middle. Let's say this is 20 degrees and this is 70 degrees. Those two angles, the 20 degree angle and the 70 degree angle, are complementary because those two angles add together to equal 90 degrees. So two angles that add together to equal 90 degrees. Another example would be if I had those exact same angles. Let's say here's the 20, here's the 70. They don't have to be connected in order for them to be complementary. We can still say these two angles are complementary because their measures add to 90 degrees. They don't have to physically be connected to each other. So just be careful on that one. All right, supplementary. Supplementary means they add to 180 degrees. So what we're doing is, again, think of it as 180 degrees is like a straight line, right? So imagine you had like something like this, and you had this one to be 40 degrees, hey, and this one is 140 degrees. Now those two angles would be considered supplementary because they add up to 180 degrees. Just like with complementary though, they don't have to form a straight line, like they don't have to be connected like that. We could have a 140 degree angle here. And then I could have a 40 degree angle here. And we could also say these two angles are supplementary. All right, so now here comes the fun part. So this is adjacent angles means next to each other. So this means that the angles are kind of connected. They share a common side. So, for example, these angles right here are adjacent because they share the common side. And then these two angles over here are adjacent because they share a common side. They both have this like ray right here as one of their sides. These are not adjacent angles because they do not share a common side. They're both separate. So, examples of adjacent angles, examples of non-adjacent angles. Just make sure you kind of keep those kind of straight in your head. All right, linear pair. Basically, a linear pair are two angles that form a straight line. So there's a couple of things that you need to understand about this. If they form a straight line, what else do we know about them? Well, they would also then be supplementary. Because if they form a straight line, they have to be 180 degrees. So the only picture up here that means that they're a linear pair would be this one right here. So I'm just going to redraw an example. Two angles that form a straight line. Let's say this is, I don't know, 60 degrees and this is 120 degrees. These two angles together form a straight line. So we would call them a linear pair because those two angles form a straight line. These two angles, even though they add up to 180 degrees, are not considered a linear pair because they do not form a straight line. They're just two separate, unconnected angles. They don't form a line. What you might notice is a linear pair has to have adjacent angles. In other words, the two angles that form a straight line have to be connected to each other. They have to share a common side. Vertical angles. So one thing I want you to know about vertical angles is they're across each other. Best diagram I can give you would be something like if I showed you kind of like an X. So if I have two lines or two line segments, and let's say I call these angles 1, 2, 3, 4. So vertical angles are two angles that are across from each other. So like angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical. So angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical. But so is 2 and 4. So they're angles that are across from each other. They are not adjacent, which means they don't share a common side. The only thing they do share is a common vertex, right? So they share that, dot or that point, that vertex in the middle. They do not form a straight line. They're not complementary, they're not supplementary. And if you've done, one of the things you probably notice is that they are equal in measure. Imagine if I had, okay, so let's say I had an example. I'm gonna switch down here. The reason why we know vertical angles are always gonna be equal, just do a little math here. Let's say I said this was 160 degrees. If this angle is 160 degrees, then what we know is that because this forms a line, this has to be 20 degrees. And why I know it's 20 degrees is because 160 plus 20 equals 180. Well, if that's true, then this angle plus this angle also forms a line, right? So that means 20 plus 160 have to add up to 180. And then if you can kind of see where I'm going with this angle and this angle have to add up to be 180 degrees because they also form a line. So then if we look at our picture, angles that are across from each other are exactly the same. And so that's how we know that vertical angles are always going to be congruent. Here's some examples of complementary and then supplementary angles like I was mentioning above. If we go to the next page, there's some examples of adjacent, non-adjacent, linear pair, and vertical. So again, just kind of giving you kind of the rundown of just some of the vocab. Lots and lots and lots of vocab in this unit, just trying to keep it all straight. I would maybe, I'm not really necessarily going to give you a vocab test, but I am going to be using a lot of the definitions and words throughout the course of this unit and beyond. And so it is going to be imperative that you know what I'm talking about. So hopefully with that, nice video. If you have any questions, make sure you ask. And yeah, we're getting ready for the unit test. So just kind of go through all of your stuff. Make sure you kind of understand everything as it goes along. Rewatch any videos that you feel like you need to. And let me know if you have any questions. Bye, guys.